Die Schlacht beginnt.
Hey folks, Iolair here. Welcome to my review and guide of the brand new premium Tier 7 German light cruiser, the Weimar. She has gone on sale in the premium shop with bundles starting at 8,800 doubloons, and I want to thank Wargaming for providing this ship to me at no cost for this review. So I'll start my review with a too long didn't read condensed summary, followed by some gameplay. I'll then jump over to port and talk through her specifications and my ship build and commander skill selection, and then I'll have some final thoughts about this ship. Folks who want to jump around are welcome to use the index that is left in the description for your convenience. So the too long didn't read condensed summary is the Weimar is essentially a light cruiser version of the York, with a limited gun range. And that is really going to be kind of her defining element. She has very good DPM, but the base firing range is 14 kilometers. And that is going to be very unfamiliar with those of you who are comfortable with the German cruisers, starting with the Königsberg and Nuremberg with ranges of 16.5 kilometers. The York's range is over 17 kilometers, and obviously the upper tier German cruisers are 17 kilometers or greater. So having a base range of only 14 kilometers is going to feel a little awkward. Now, she does get a spotter plane that increases her range by 30%, which is basically a slightly buffed version of a traditional spotting aircraft that only adds 20% to the range. But the active time of the consumable is 60 seconds, and the cooldown is 4 minutes, which is again identical to traditional spotting aircraft. Now there are some build choices here that allow you to get the spotting aircraft to come up more frequently, but otherwise working with a 14 kilometer range is, again, like I said, is going to be sort of unfamiliar territory for German cruiser players. So on bigger maps like Trap and Tears of the Desert and North and Northern Waters and so on, you will need to be more patient in deciding where you can position in order to put your DPM to use, because you have to get closer to the action, and most, if not all, of the bigger ships are going to have better range than you, and so you will end up maybe not engaging as early as you normally would, because you're trying to find a good position to operate without putting yourself in harm's way. Now, on these medium-sized maps like Trident, which is what I'm on here, even Haven, Estuary, and so forth, there tends to be some good island cover that is at medium ranges, and you can operate much more comfortably as a cruiser. And from there, once you are in a position where you are comfortable, again, German cruiser players are going to be comfortable with how to play the Weimar. Now, another key distinction difference, I should say, between the Weimar and the York is the Weimar does not get the 25 millimeter bow and stern that the York picked up last year as a buff. The York is able to bow tank the 356 millimeter or 14-inch AP shells fired by a lot of mid-tier battleships. The Weimar does not have that benefit. She has a 16 millimeter bow and stern, which means she's going to be overmatched by all battleship AP calibers, even the 283 millimeter from the Scharnhorst. So you have to be more careful about your engagements against battleships. Now, one other interesting twist up her sleeve, in addition to her spotting aircraft, is she gets the engine boost consumable. Now, this is a buffed version of engine boost, and it increases her speed by 15%. Now, her base speed is 31 knots, which is okay, and is kind of, well, it's a slightly slow for a cruiser in general, but it's actually pretty typical for German cruisers. Now, with the engine boost active, that will get her speed up to about 36 knots, and then with a Sierra Mike signal, you can get it pretty close to 38 knots. So she's relatively quick if she needs to get around, and that does give her some advantages, so that since she does need to get closer to the action in order to engage, having the engine boost to be able to escape potentially dangerous situations can be quite useful. So, in general, like I said, folks familiar with German cruisers, so long as you're within a good operating range and you can sort of master the 14-kilometer range limitation, you will generally do quite well with her. You will like her DPM. Now, her base reload is 8 seconds, which is slower than on the Nürnberg and on the Mainz. But given that she's got 12 guns at tier 7, 8 seconds is pretty typical for reload on light cruisers at this tier anyway. And she does get the 1/4 penetration on her HE shells, and she does have very good AP alpha. So, and as you can see here, she also has 2 sets of 3 torpedoes on each side of her ship, like the York and most of the other German cruisers. So I'm going to end up taking out this New York in a dev strike. So yeah, so again, for those of you comfortable with the German cruisers and their torpedoes, that is going to work out pretty well. So I have quite liked the Weimar, but again, it does require some significant improvement in situational awareness because of the limited range, and you really have to be much more patient in terms of your positioning options so that you don't put yourself in harm's way, because you're going to end up being closer to the action than you traditionally would be with other German cruisers. So I'm going to push out here with AP loaded against the Graf Spee. And I don't remember if I get any Citadel hits here, but he is giving me, yes, I do get one, but he is giving me flat broadside, and that's going to allow me to put that AP to use and help finish off. Well, I thought I was going to finish off the ship in that salvo. I left a little bit on the table, and hopefully that salvo will take her out, and I can move back south and move back over to try to support retaking Bravo for our team. By the way, in this particular match, I'm division with my good colleagues Jimmy Jazz and Yoda, who are both playing destroyers, which is great. Really nice to have 2 competent destroyer players helping to support me and the team. And helping to take caps and so on. So I'm going to push back to Bravo here. Our team is behind, and so we want to help take out the destroyers here. The Z-39 is spotted in the cap, and we're going to want to get him taken out and then be able to retake the cap. Now, there was a destroyer that was northwest of Bravo. He may be coming back. In fact, there's another destroyer here, which is the Fubuki. And well, some of my shells clipped, but yeah, the having the 12 guns at this tier is pretty potent, especially with the 1/4 penetration. You can put on some pretty strong hurt against mid-tier battleships for sure, and you don't need IFHE in order to pen even upper tier battleships, as my secondaries get the kill on the Z-39 for my third kill of the game. So yeah, this is going pretty well, and we're going to move, like I said, we're going to move back to the middle of the map. Now the opposing York here, that's to my northeast, he's actually a fairly significant threat if I give him a lot of side. If he knows to be firing AP, he can Citadel me pretty hard from this angle. And I'm going to just pull away from the cap and let Jimmy Jazz and the other destroyers and Yoda push in to retake the caps. And I'm just going to pull away. We have lost on the east flank, so I'm going to move more towards the middle of the map and start putting DPM out on the opponents that are pushing in from the east. The York is pulling away from the cap. That's going to help. It doesn't look like he's targeting me, although now I do have somebody targeting me. I do think this is the York that's going to look to target me. So there's a Dunkirk and there is a Bayern on the opposing team that are pushing up from the east flank. So that's really the ones that I kind of want to get over to get a fire on the York, and also be able to... if there's another destroyer that's going to push over and maybe try to make a run on our carrier, I can try to cut him off. I do have my engine boost ready to go as well, if needed. All right, so yeah, like I said, I have quite enjoyed the Weimar. She does have the limited range, and for some players that may be a deal breaker, and I can certainly understand why. I'm a big German ship fan. My regular viewers know this, so I'm going to find a way to enjoy the Weimar one way or the other. But I can definitely see that for some players, having the limited range is an issue. For example, I would be able to hit the Bayern from here in my York, and it wouldn't take too much longer to be able to get the Bayern into range for a Nürnberg. So that's a little bit of a challenge to be able to choose how and where you're going to engage. I want to be in a position that I can kite here. Now, I was hesitating on pushing in here because I would end up being potentially crossfired by the Dunkirk, but thankfully he does go down to torpedoes from my colleague Yoda, who's pushed into the Charlie Cap to help take that, and now the Bayern has gotten into position. I also have the Montecuccoli, who's dropped into smoke in front of me, and so he's going to be the first that I'm going to focus. Now, I'm going to be firing AP here. I was hoping that I would get a little more pen action by firing up into his superstructure, but I ended up bouncing a little more than I would have expected. The Montecuccoli is a pretty squishy light cruiser, but I was hoping I would be able to get more pens. I do think I switch over to HE here shortly, but you can see we're whittling him down pretty well. So, in fact, he's slowed quite a bit here, and I'm bouncing a lot off of his turrets and his front guns. Yeah. There, that got up into the superstructure, but our Arizona finishes him off, and now the Bayern is in range. I'm going to switch over to HE here. Now, the Bayern is only about 10 kilometers away, so I'm going to operate in a kiting posture. I've activated my engine boost here so I can pull away if I need to accelerate out to get a fire on the Bayern. He's now definitely targeting me, and I'm going to need to get moving here. I'm giving him a lot of side right now. In fact, I'm surprised he didn't come back to target me again. So I'm going to start kiting away here, trying to keep the DPM up to get him off the flank. Our team has gotten a very strong handle. We've got a ship lead. We are, again, now working to take the Charlie Cap, or at least contesting it. And everybody seems to be focusing the Bayern right now. So the Bayern is in a crossfire, and he's also being dropped by the carrier, so he's going to go down here relatively quickly. I'm trying to get my shells up into the superstructure. There is Confederate, and he still isn't deciding to target me. There is another fire. And so at this point, I think at this point I'm realizing he's going to be close enough, or he's pushing in close enough, that I probably can send torpedoes as a little bit of an insurance to ensure he goes down. It looks like now he is going to start targeting me. No, he decided not to. Okay, there go the torpedoes. Yeah, so he's definitely pushing in enough that I could hit him with torpedoes because he continues to angle in. There's high caliber at about 115,000 in damage. And now I'm going to fire AP into his casemate, which I can usually get some pretty good pens. He does fire on me, and I think he's going to pen me pretty hard here. Yeah, not sure if he got a Citadel there, but he definitely put the hurt on, and that takes him out for the 4th kill. Well, we've got this game well in hand. It's just the opposing carrier, and our team is going to take him out, and we're going to win this game. So I'll cut over to port and talk about the ship specifications, my commander build, and have some final thoughts about the ship. Okay, here we are in port with the Weimar, starting with her armor layout. She is a light cruiser, and she has armor commensurate with being a light cruiser at tier 7, 16 millimeter bow and stern. I mentioned this during the gameplay. So she is going to be overmatched by all battleship AP calibers in the game that she's going to face. She has a reasonably well-protected Citadel, which is indicative of the York as well. It's not super good. She is going to get Citadel fairly reliably by battleships and heavy cruisers. In closer combat, the slope decks will give her potentially a little more protection, but you should still treat her as a light cruiser from a sort of a protection and armor perspective. As far as her survivability, 32,000 HP with a 10% reduction in torpedo damage. Compare that with the York. The York has 600 more hit points, so she's slightly larger hit point pool. And as I mentioned, also with the York, she's got the 25 millimeter bow and stern, which allows the York, which is a heavy cruiser, to bow tank the 356 millimeter AP from battleships, which the Weimar cannot. All right, coming back to the Weimar. Artillery, I talked about this at some significant length, at least with regard to the range. It's limited to 14 kilometers base. These are the same guns as on the Nuremberg. So those of you familiar with Nuremberg guns, these are rail guns out of the barrels at 960 meters per second. They are fairly light shells so that they will lose velocity, and they get a little more floaty once they get out to about 12, 13 kilometers, but it's not too bad. Turret traverse is the same as on the Nuremberg at 23.7 seconds for 180 degrees. The reload is 8 seconds. The alpha is pretty anemic at 1700 for HE, but is very high at 3900 for the AP. And you also get the 1/4 penetration at 38 millimeters, which means that the HE shells will penetrate the decks of upper tier U.S. Navy battleships without IFHE. Those decks are 38 millimeters. So you definitely don't need IFHE on the Weimar, just like you don't need it on the other German cruisers. So like I said, the big issue is going to be the range. One thing I should mention, secondaries, and I did get a secondary kill in the replay. These do also get the 1/4 penetration. These are the standard 105 millimeter dual purpose secondaries that you see on a lot of German ships, both cruisers and battleships. And they have a base range of 6.6 kilometers, which is pretty nice. Some pretty long range secondaries for a cruiser at this tier. All right, torpedoes, again, these are going to be the same, or in fact, they are identical to what you have on the York. 2 sets of 3 on each side of the ship. They have a 68-second reload. They go 6 kilometers. They have a reasonably good sort of stealth at 1.3 kilometers. But the reality is when you're within 6 kilometers, the opponents know you're sending torpedoes generally. So the detection isn't so much of an issue. And the speed is okay at 64 knots. So again, those of you familiar with the German cruiser torpedo systems are going to be comfortable with these. AA is not particularly remarkable, 189 hit points per second continuous. The short range tends to be pretty good. Mid and long range is pretty mediocre. And again, that's pretty typical for Tier 7 cruisers. You are going to do pretty well against Tier 6 aircraft, but against Tier 8, they're going to be able to drop you pretty easily. And the range of the AA is 5.2 kilometers. And again, that's pretty typical for German cruisers. Maneuverability base speed is 31 knots. I do have a Sierra mic signal on, so it's 32.6 here, and I will talk about signal recommendations near the end of the video. Turning circle is reasonably small. This is atypical of German cruisers. Both the York and the Weimar have pretty good turning circles for German cruisers at 650 meters. The rudder here is 8.8 seconds. I do take the propulsion modification upgrade in slot 4 instead of the steering gears. If you took the steering gears, you'll bring the turning circle down to, or the rudder shift time, excuse me, down to slightly less than 7 seconds. And then as far as concealment, she's actually better concealed than the York. And I think that's a little bit of a compensation for her limited range. The York's detection, I believe, is 12.1 kilometers. Yes. And her smoke firing range is 8.3 kilometers. The Weimar, she has an 11.5 kilometer detection range and smoke detection or smoke firing detection of 6.6 kilometers. So she can operate a little more comfortably within smoke, and she has a slightly smaller detection range. Again, she does have the, more than 3 kilometers shorter range than the York. So definitely having the smaller detection can be useful. All right, going over to my upgrades. So main armaments modification 1 in slot 1. In slot 2, I took the hydroacoustic search special upgrade. You could, if you prefer defensive fire, you could take the defensive fire upgrade. But being a German cruiser, having the hydro is definitely useful. 5.5 kilometer detection on the ships can be very powerful. You could also elect to take the engine boost upgrade. Because she does have the engine boost consumable, and this increases the duration of the engine boost by 30%. So that's also a viable option. If you don't want to sink the 17,000 coal into either or any of these special upgrades, I would recommend the engine room protection to protect your engine from being taken out or your rudder being taken out. Slot 3, I took aiming systems. This also slightly increases the secondary battery firing range. Another option would be potentially to take the AA guns modification to get the AA prioritization sector to recover a little more quickly. I wouldn't bother with secondary battery modification, nor with torpedo tubes modification. These are, your torpedoes are not your primary armament. Some players may prefer to take the main battery modification too to get the turrets to traverse more quickly. But I find that the turrets are fast enough that for me, this is not an issue. So I prefer to try to keep my shells on target with the aiming systems. Slot 4, I take the propulsion modification upgrade. Many players may prefer to take the steering gears to reduce the rudder shift time. But because you are having to play closer to your targets, being able to accelerate and decelerate more quickly with a propulsion modification for me has been more useful. So that's my experience. And that's what I would recommend for upgrades. Consumables, obviously damage control that everybody gets. You've got the hydroacoustic search. This is the superior German hydro. Again, you can alternatively elect to take the defensive fire. The next slot, you get the spotter aircraft as an option. You can also take fighter like you have for most of the other German cruisers if you prefer. But especially when you're on the bigger maps, having the spotting aircraft can be very useful to be able to put fire on things that normally would be outside your 14-kilometer firing range. And then lastly, you get the engine boost consumable, which increases your speed by 15%, and it has an action time of 3 minutes or 180 seconds. Reload is 90 seconds. I have slightly less than 90 seconds here because I have a November Foxtrot signal, on the ship. And again, I will get to the signals. All right, getting to commander skills, you have a couple of different choices. Now, I take Günther Lütjens from my Hindenburg and put him on here because I take advantage of the buffed main battery reloader talent that reduces the reload, improves your DPM. If you didn't want to do that, I would suggest a build that maybe optimizes for the spotter aircraft, and I'm going to put a different commander on here to show you what that would look like. But as far as base skills that I would take for the Weimar, I would start with Gunfeeder to be able to toggle between HE and AP efficiently. I would take Priority Target, Adrenaline Rush, and lastly, Concealment Expert. Now, on cruisers, I am very fond of the top grade gunner. This skill improves your main battery reload when there is an opponent within your base detection range, or there's a detected opponent, I should say, within your base detection range. Now, cruisers are all about DPM. This skill really makes a cruiser more effective, especially in late game situations where you might be pushing in to be pressing a flank or something, escorting battleships and so on. And so to me, top grade gunner is a very useful skill on pretty much every cruiser in the game. So this tends to be my next go-to as far as a level 4 skill. Now after that, it's up to you. Because I have the Hindenburg, I take Superintendent for the extra heal. You may not want that or need that for the Weimar. You may prefer to have Survivability Expert to give you some additional healing or some other skills. I have radio location because I find that's useful for being able to hunt destroyers. If you didn't want to take that, there's lots of other options as well. Now let me show you what this would look like if you were to do a build that optimizes for the spotter aircraft. Well, the build I would start with is the same. I would start with Gunfeeder. I would take Priority Target, Adrenaline Rush, and Concealment. This is the base 4. I would take Top Grade Gunner. Now to maximize the spotting aircraft, I would take Eye in the Sky. Now this skill reduces the reload time of the spotter aircraft by 50%. So instead of a 4-minute cooldown, it's now a 2-minute cooldown. Now it does reduce the action time of the consumable by 50% as well. So the plane would only be available for 30 seconds, but it also adds 2 charges to the spotting aircraft consumable. So this would be one way to help improve or change the dynamics of the spotting aircraft. The other thing you can do for spotting aircraft is take the Consumables Specialist skill. This reduces the cooldown of the spotting aircraft by another 10%, and therefore you would reduce it by another 12 seconds. So that could be very useful. And then after that, again, you've got 4 points left over. You could put that into a variety of things. You could go into Consumables enhancement to extend the action time of the Hydro. You could take Superintendent to give you an extra charge. You could take Last Stand or Grease the Gears. There's a variety of different options, but this set of skills here is going to make for a pretty competent build for the ship, maximizing the use of the spotting aircraft. Now, I have been asked by players about whether to take the heavy HE and SAP shell skill, which increases the alpha of your HE shells. Now, on a lot of long-range artillery cruisers, this can be very potent. On the Hindenburg, on the Henri IV, on the Moskva, and so on. This can be a very powerful skill. The advantage that those cruisers have is that they have the range to tolerate the increase in their base detection, because your base detection is increased by 15% when you take this skill. And if you put this on the Weimar, that increases your base detection to 13.2 kilometers. That leaves you only 800 meters between your base detection and your maximum firing range. And since the Weimar is generally has to be closer in order to operate, I don't think this is a good option for the Weimar, in my opinion. So I did test with this skill, and I found that it reduced the flexibility and made me more vulnerable in too many situations to make this really useful, in my opinion. So I would not recommend this skill for the Weimar, simply because the range is just not good enough to do it. So this is like I said, this is a good build if you wanted to optimize for the spotting aircraft skills. All right, let me go over to the signals here for a moment and talk about what I would use there. So this is sort of the optimum set of combat signals that you could use with the Weimar. You would take November Foxtrot to reduce the cooldown on consumables. Again, that's very useful for both the Hydro and the spotting aircraft, as well as for the engine boost. You have this Sierra Mike signal to improve your base speed. You have India X-Ray as well as Victor Lima, both of which increase the fire chance of your HE shells each by 0.5%. And then lastly, Juliet Charlie to eliminate the chance of detonation. And then I should say finally here now, Sierra Bravo, and this increases the action time of the hydroacoustic search, which can also be quite useful. So if you have the signals to use, whether in a competitive situation or you just you want to use them for random battles, this would sort of be the optimal set. You could also take November Echo set to 7 to improve the AA a little bit, as another option would be another possibility. So those would be the signals that I would suggest for the Weimar. All right, so let me offer some final thoughts about the ship. So like I said, I like the Weimar, but she is not going to be for everybody. For those of you comfortable with German cruisers, if you can master the 14-kilometer base firing range and know how to play with that, you will be successful with the Weimar. For those of you who are not very comfortable with cruisers and cruisers with limited range and the patience and sort of very good situational awareness that has to accompany the limited range, this ship may not be for you. But like I said, if you are otherwise comfortable, I think that you would quite like the Weimar, and she would be a good ship to pick up. So that's going to conclude my review and guide of this brand new premium ship. I hope you enjoyed the guide and review. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.